What does it really mean to leave everyone else? Is there anything anywhere that defines this promise in wedding vows? I didn't think so, but apparently others have different views, because in most cases, these wedding vows are broken. I was at work the day Charlie Hughes returned after being out with the flu for a few days. I guess he realized how boring it can be sitting at home alone. His wife worked, and his kids were in school, so he had no one to talk to. Anyway, Charlie was complaining about an Oprah show he watched the afternoon before, where several married women were talking about the thrill of having lesbian affairs behind their husbands' backs. Charlie found it appalling that such a topic was being aired on national television, especially to an audience of women who might easily be influenced by Oprah's sophistication and wealth. He wondered aloud about the husbands of these women, how this would affect their marriages, and what would happen to the divorce rate if more women felt encouraged to try it after watching the show. I suppose I had to agree with Charlie, and when I got home that night I ended up venting a bit to my wife Grace about the situation. She listened to my ranting with an odd expression, and I guess I should have noticed something was off, but it didn't immediately register. When I finished, she just turned away and shrugged, as if to brush off my concern. Don't get so worked up over it. Most women wouldn't even consider something like that, and even if they did, they wouldn't act on it. But what if they did? It's not like she was really cheating on her husband. It was with another woman, she replied, still avoiding eye contact with me. I don't see it that way. Our wedding vows say, forsaking all others, not just people of the opposite intimacy. In my opinion, that's just as unfaithful as being with another man. How would you feel if I was involved with another man? I guess you're right, but it's not like you'd be sharing love between two people. That's something you reserve for your spouse. Intimacy should only be shared with the person you love. As a man and a faithful husband, my marriage is built on love, trust, and respect. Without those, it's not a marriage to me. She stood silently, staring out the kitchen window. It was at that moment I think I started to suspect something. Her demeanor and actions were signaling that she was hiding something related to our conversation. After 23 years together, you get to know someone's moods, and I could tell something was definitely bothering her. Is there something you want to talk about, Grace? I think it's important to give you some context about our situation. My wife, Grace, and I had been married for 23 years. We have a son, Mark, who had recently graduated from MIT with a degree in engineering and moved to Nashville to work for a consulting engineering firm. At 44, Grace was still a very attractive woman and maintained her fitness by regularly attending a local health spa. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, she had a slim but feminine build, weighed 135 pounds, and stylishly cropped blonde hair. She worked as a teacher at our local high school and was actively involved in the activities held there, especially related to girls' education, sports, and social events. I loved her deeply and admired her love for me, her intelligence, and her devotion to both her family and her job. As for me, I'm Jim, a laid-back guy, standing at 6 feet 1 inch and weighing 182 pounds. I suppose my looks are pretty average. Women didn't exactly swoon when I walked into a room, but I'd been flirted with on a couple of occasions, so maybe I wasn't a complete write-off. I ran regularly to stay in shape and felt pretty good about my health at 45. With our son grown and the costs of his education behind us, we finally had the freedom to enjoy life. We were saving a good amount of money each year, aiming to retire in about 10 years, so we could travel and experience life during our later years. Our intimacy life was still good, happening at least twice a week. Not as often as when we were younger, but certainly not bad. I thought we had it all. She turned away from the window and looked at me, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. "What's the matter?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread rising within me. Her face showed deep anguish, and I realized then that the issue was connected to what I had been venting about when I got home from work. Still, I wanted her to say it herself. For the past several months, she had been working closely with a younger colleague, another teacher, on developing a curriculum for a new girls' health class. This, she had explained, required them to spend a few evenings each week at the other woman's apartment. Now I remembered that on those nights, when she came home, she would go straight to the shower and seemed disinterested in intimacy. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Her behavior toward me hadn't changed. If anything, she had been more attentive and caring. With a sob, she suddenly turned away and hurried to our bedroom, closing the door behind her. "Grace?" I called after her before the door shut, but there was no reply. I was in shock. What on earth had she done? Collapsing into a chair in the kitchen, I buried my face in my hands as tears started rolling down my cheeks. I couldn't believe the thoughts running through my head, but it had to be true. There was no other reason for her to react like that. She was having an affair with that other female teacher. As I sat there, memories of our 23 years of marriage and the wonderful life we'd shared flashed through my mind. I had always wanted a daughter, but after the birth of our son, she hadn't been able to have more children. The good times, the love, even the intimacy we shared. These were cherished moments that had defined our lives up until now. But now what? I had to wait until she confirmed it. I'd give her some time to calm down in the bedroom, and then we'd have to talk. Wiping away my tears, I walked to the den and settled into my recliner. Closing my eyes, I braced myself to wait. Even though I knew it was bad, I could feel my anger growing with each passing moment. About 45 minutes later, I heard the bedroom door creak open, and she appeared at the doorway. As I straightened up in the recliner, I motioned for her to sit on the sofa across from me. "Have a seat, Grace. I'm ready to listen to what you have to say. Is it related to you and Clara?" She looked bad. Her eyes were red and tear-stained, her hair was disheveled, and she seemed completely depressed. I haven't seen her like this since the day her mother died. "Yes, and I'm really sorry, Jim." I convinced myself that it wasn't that important. It was just a close relationship with Clara, and I didn't realize how much it would affect you. If you thought it was okay and that I would accept it, why didn't you tell me about it directly, Grace? Just intimacy? I can't believe it. You knew it was wrong, but you decided to hide it from me anyway. What was more important to you? The relationship itself or the secret? Like those women on Oprah's show who were worried about hiding their actions. Well, Grace, you can live with whoever you choose because it's over for us. Pack your things and leave. As far as I'm concerned, you broke our vows and our marriage no longer exists, so now you can be with the one you chose without hiding. Please, Jim, we can work this out. We could go to counseling. Our marriage doesn't have to end over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I shouted, my anger boiling over. "You don't get it, do you? This wasn't some misunderstanding. It was pure deceit, lying, and betrayal. There was no confusion about what happened. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and leave. If you're still here after that, I'll throw you and your cheating self out the front door." "Jim, can't we discuss this calmly? This is my home too. If you want to fight over who stays or leaves, go talk to a lawyer. But you're leaving now, because I can't promise you'll be safe here if you don't. You've got 9 minutes left." Tears streaming down her face, she left the room and went back to our bedroom. I could hear her pulling a suitcase from her walk-in closet and the sound of bureau drawers sliding open and shut. To my surprise, she had a bag packed with business clothes on hangers in under 10 minutes. Her eyes were still red and swollen as she headed towards the door leading to the garage. "I'll be at my sister's. Call me when you think it's okay for me to come home," she said as she passed by. I just stared at her, saying nothing. A few seconds later, I heard the garage door open and her car start. Then she was gone, and I was alone. I was relieved she hadn't gone to Carla's. After she left, I just sat there pondering my next steps, but I couldn't come to any conclusions. Eventually, I got up and made myself a sandwich to settle my stomach. Grace had already started dinner, but I wasn't in the mood for a heavy meal. My stomach churned as I struggled to make sense of my emotions. What did I want to do? Divorce? Seek counseling? Reconcile? Could I trust her again? Did I even want to reconcile? Thoughts swirled in my mind chaotically, and I couldn't organize them into any coherent logic. I was back in the den, sitting in front of the TV, not really paying attention when the phone rang. I reached over to answer it and heard Betty, Grace's younger sister, on the line. "What's going on, Jim?" "Grace is here with her luggage, and she's a wreck. She won't or can't tell me what happened, and now she's got Jake, her husband, and the kids upset with you. I heard you threw her out." "That's correct, Betty. I found out she's been having an affair." "Oh my God, you've got to be joking. Grace, I can't believe it. Who is it? Do you know?" "It's that teacher she's been working with on the school project, Carla." "Another woman?" "I didn't know she was gay. When did this happen?" "I guess over the last month or so." "Well, it was just another woman. Aren't you going to get some counseling and take her back?" "You don't get it. I take this as seriously as if she'd cheated with another man. This isn't just about her not respecting me or our marriage vows. It makes me feel like I'm not enough for her, that she has to go elsewhere to meet her needs. That's a huge slap in the face, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. But I do know I want her out of the house until I figure things out." "All right, Jim. She can stay with us for a few days, but if you haven't reconciled by then, she'll need to find somewhere else. The kids will have to share rooms until she leaves." "Have you told Mark yet?" "No, I haven't, and I don't plan to until I've made up my mind. He doesn't need to know right now." "Okay, Jim. This whole thing really shocks me. I'll go talk to her now that I know what's happened." "Thanks, Betty. Keep me updated, and I'll let you know what I'm going to do as soon as I can." That night I barely slept. Since the day we got married, we'd always slept in the same bed, except for the few times I had to travel overnight for work or when she visited her mother. I missed having her beside me. Eventually I fell asleep, trying to sort through what I needed to do. When I woke up the next morning, I remembered it was Saturday and why Grace wasn't there. The memory hit me hard and I felt deeply saddened. Then I realized it was Saturday, meaning I couldn't reach out to any divorce lawyers for a couple of days. As I sat with a cup of coffee after breakfast, I noticed that my anger had lessened, and I could finally start addressing the issue. I suppose the first thing I needed to understand was why she did it, though she might not even be able to explain it to me. I had always thought our marriage was good, and that we were satisfied with each other in bed. So why did she do it? Did she really believe I would be okay with it, or was that just her way of justifying the affair? Had there been other affairs I didn't know about? If I forgave her, could I ever trust her again? Was our marriage even worth saving? We had 23 years invested in it, and I had been looking forward to growing old together. Damn, I was getting too old to start a new relationship, but I wasn't going to be made a fool of again. That much I knew for sure. I finally made up my mind about what I needed to do before reaching a final decision, and I picked up the phone. "Betty, this is Jim. Can you get Grace on your extension? I've come to a decision of sorts, and I want both of you to hear it." "Shouldn't you be talking to your wife, Jim?" "I'm not sure I should be involved in this. We've spoken, and I know she feels deeply remorseful for what she's done. She wants to apologize, but is afraid to come home, even though she's willing to do whatever it takes to fix things." "I'm glad she's so remorseful," I replied sarcastically. but she might not like what I need her to do before I even consider seeing her again. I want you on the call to make sure she understands what's required. So please get her on the extension. All right, Jim. Just a moment. Jim? Hello, Grace. Are you there, Betty? Yes, I'm here. Okay, Grace. Here's what I need before we can even discuss reconciliation. I want you to get a full psychiatric evaluation to figure out why you did what you did. I need answers, and I won't accept any excuses. Before I can trust you again, I need assurance that this won't happen again. Do you understand me, Grace? Yes, I hear you, Jim. I'll do it, but it might take some time. Can I come home? I'd prefer not to see you again unless I believe there's a chance for us to reconcile. Find yourself a furnished apartment. I'll be out tomorrow afternoon and you can come by to pick up more of your stuff. After that, I'm changing the locks. Okay, Jim, she sobbed. Betty, I need you to keep me updated on her progress with a psychiatrist. I want some closure on this when the time is right. Okay, Jim, but you should know she's my sister, and I'm not going to rat her out. All I want to know is if she's seeing a therapist. If she isn't, I'll be talking to a divorce lawyer. Okay, Jim, is that all? No, I want you to quit your job and cut off all contact with Clara. Oh, Jim, I won't see or contact Clara again. I'll ask for another teacher to work with me on the program, and we'll handle it during my work hours at school. Please don't make me give that up. I'll do everything else you ask, but I'm begging you not to take that away. All right, Grace, I'll back off. But I would feel better if you transferred to a different school for the next school year. I'll do that, Jim. Thank you. You've really messed everything up, Grace. I know, and I'm so sorry. Have you told Mark? Not yet, but he'll figure out we aren't living together. I'll tell him we've decided to take a break from each other. He'll know there's more to it, but I won't say anything. You can tell him if you want. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. I signed off and went outside to mow the lawn. As I was doing it, my thoughts wandered to my marital issues and how I could keep track of Grace. After finishing the lawn, I went inside, got on my computer, and started searching for GPS tracking devices. I found what I needed and placed an express delivery order. With this, I could monitor Grace's whereabouts whenever she drove within a 5-mile radius of our home or my laptop. Now I had to figure out how to discreetly install the transmitter in her car. It was costly but necessary, since I couldn't rely on her sister to keep me updated. Later that evening, the phone rang, and the caller ID showed it was Carla. Anger surged through me as I answered the call. Yes, I said. Jim, it's Carla. Is Grace there? She didn't come to school today, and I wondered if she was sick. We have a meeting tonight. Grace doesn't live here anymore, Carla, I replied, my teeth clenched. The girl of easy virtue is busy finding herself a new place to live. I'm surprised she hasn't reached out to you, her lover, for a place to stay. Don't call here again, and stay far away from me. Oh my God. She hung up, leaving me with a dial tone. Part of me was relieved she called. It meant Grace hadn't reached out to her. I started to think that if Grace suddenly decided to end our marriage and move in with her lover, I should protect my financial assets. It would be easy to reverse things if our marriage continued. So, on Monday morning, I went to the bank and transferred half of our joint accounts into new ones under my name only. I did the same with our non-IRA investments. Then I returned to work and called our insurance agent to remove Grace as my beneficiary and replace her with our son Mark. Afterward, I contacted our family lawyer and asked him to draft a new will, naming only Mark as the heir to my estate. I also asked for a referral to a good divorce attorney, and after expressing his sympathies, he recommended Donna Sinclair as the best in the area. Once I finished speaking with him, I called Ms. Sinclair's office and scheduled an appointment for the following afternoon. Even though I wasn't sure if I'd go through with the divorce, I thought it would be helpful to sit down with her and explore my options. I buried myself in work to escape my marital troubles, but coming home to an empty house every evening was depressing. A call from Betty lifted my spirits a little. She told me that Grace had scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist and would be going in for her initial session on Thursday. She also mentioned that Grace hadn't gone to work that day but would likely return tomorrow. Slowly, she was beginning to pull herself together and had stopped crying all the time. Good. It's comforting to know she's been struggling. On Wednesday, the GPS tracking equipment arrived. After going through the instructions, I set it up and installed the required software on my laptop. The system was designed to automatically notify me via my cell phone if any predefined boundary limits were crossed. Once everything was ready, I installed the tracking transmitter on my car and took it for a test drive. It worked perfectly. The next step was to get the transmitter on Grace's car. The transmitter was quite small and had a magnetic attachment. That night I went to Betty's house and found Grace's car parked in the driveway. It was easy to slip underneath and attach the device to a steel bar behind the bumper before leaving. With fresh batteries, it could transmit for up to a month. Plenty of time to find out what I needed to know. Namely, whether Grace was still meeting with Carla. My days were now filled with waiting for my phone to notify me if Grace had driven outside the boundaries I'd set in the tracking program. I had deliberately configured the boundaries to exclude Clara's apartment, but to include most other ordinary locations. I figured Clara wouldn't go to Betty's house, but if they were going to meet, it would likely happen at Clara's place. What I couldn't control was if they met elsewhere, but it didn't seem logical for them to do that. Then again, logic doesn't always apply when you're dealing with a cheater. Betty kept me informed about Grace's visits to the psychiatrist, but aside from the tracker, the only thing I knew was that she went to work at her school every day, where she might have been meeting Clara. However, according to the tracker, she wasn't visiting Clara's apartment in the evenings. I would have to wait and see what would happen once she moved into her own place. About a week and a half after she left home, Betty told me Grace was moving into a furnished apartment and that she would no longer be able to update me on Grace's appointments with the psychiatrist. Now, I was fully relying on the tracker for information. When Grace moved into her new apartment, I adjusted the boundaries in the program to include her new residence, the school, Betty's house, and the psychiatrist's office. I continued to monitor her. The only thing the tracker couldn't tell me was if Clara visited her at the apartment. However, I doubted Grace would allow that because I knew what Clara's car looked like and I could potentially spot it. I did check a few evenings but never saw Clara's car there. Finally, one evening, I received a phone call from Grace. "Jim, I just wanted to let you know I've had 3 sessions with the psychiatrist, and she would like you to come to my next session this Thursday afternoon so she can explain some things to you. Can you come?" "I'll be there, Grace. What time and where?" I already knew the location thanks to the tracker, but I asked, so she wouldn't get suspicious that I was following her. "It's at 4 p.m., room 204 in Medical Plaza West on Graves Street. Thank you so much for supporting me, honey. I want to get this resolved as soon as possible." I heard her sob before she spoke again. "You don't know how much I've missed you." "Okay, Grace. I'll see you on Thursday." On Thursday afternoon, I arrived early at the psychiatrist's office and had to wait in the reception area with Grace for a few minutes. I was hopeful that when we left, we could go home together. When we were finally called into the psychiatrist's office, she had us sit in a small alcove in the corner where there was a couch and an armchair facing it. She gestured for us to sit on the couch while she took the chair. The psychiatrist, a woman around our age with a well-kept appearance, looked like someone who took care of herself through regular exercise. "Jim, it's good to finally meet you. As you know, Grace and I have had 3 sessions so far, and I think it's important we discuss her visits here. First, can you tell me what you hope to achieve from this? Grace has shared what you've told her, but I'd like to hear it directly from you. You're aware that Grace had an affair with another woman, and I can't, and won't, see it any differently than if it were with a man. I'm not sure Grace views it the same way, but I consider it a serious breach of our marriage vows. I need to understand if her actions stem from a mental illness, or what would drive her to break our wedding vows, and if so, whether it's something that can be cured so she'll never be tempted again. I can forgive her, but only if I feel I can trust her moving forward. I understand your concerns about your marriage and how essential trust is to you. However, psychiatry deals with mental illnesses, and based on my assessment, Grace is not suffering from any mental disorder that would require psychiatric treatment or a cure. She has normal mental responses with some minor issues, but no illness. I would recommend you see a psychologist or marriage counselor to help work through your marital problems. Okay, so she doesn't have a mental illness, but then why would she suddenly start a relationship with someone else? Was I mistaken? I asked, turning to face Grace. Was that your first time with someone else? Oh, Jim, there has never been anyone but you, and I'm so sorry for my affair with Clara. I had to trust her. Grace wasn't the type to easily conceal her emotions, especially when under pressure. The psychiatrist continued, I'll do my best to answer your question, Jim, without resorting to too much jargon. From a psychological perspective, Grace may have felt a void in her life. As women approach 40, they often struggle with the notion that their appearance might start to fade, making them more vulnerable to outside influences and temptations. In today's society, there's also greater acceptance of different lifestyles, which can sometimes blur the boundaries of previous norms related to intimacy behavior. Grace likely downplayed the significance of societal expectations regarding her relationship with someone of the same intimacy, and how it affected your marriage. I know you take your vows very seriously, and Grace lost sight of that. Now she's facing the consequences. Hopefully, not to the extent of losing her marriage. She's completely committed now to making things work. I believe you can fully trust her moving forward. She continued, I strongly recommend once again that the two of you see a marriage counselor to help get your relationship back on track. You've been together for 23 years, and I know you both have invested too much in each other and your marriage to throw it all away now. Does that help address your concerns? I think I understand your assessment, I responded, but I get the impression that my strict adherence to our vows seems unusual to you. Is there a reason for that? What's unique about the words, forsaking all others? She looked momentarily surprised, as if at a loss for words. I'm sorry if you got that impression. Fidelity in marriage is crucial, and I didn't mean to suggest anything negative about your commitment to those words. She apologized. Can you offer another interpretation? I asked. No, I suppose I can't, she admitted. Are you married? Yes, I am, and I believe I'm very happily married. I notice you're not wearing any wedding rings. I wear them when I'm not professionally engaged with a patient. I don't want them to be a distraction. I noticed a slight flush in her cheeks, and she seemed uneasy, as though she had something to hide. I didn't press the matter, but it made me wonder if some people didn't take their vows as seriously as others. Thank you, Doctor. I think we'll be going now. I need to help Grace pack and move back home, I said, turning to Grace and embracing her. Tears streamed down her face as we said our goodbyes. That evening, Grace returned home, and after going out for dinner, we headed back to our place where I assisted her in unpacking some of her belongings before bed. I was a bit anxious about my performance, but just seeing her body was enough to rekindle our intimate connection. The following morning, we shared breakfast before heading off to our separate commitments, smiling and laughing together like newlyweds. There was still a touch of shyness, but it felt like we were savoring a newfound relationship. As I picked up my laptop to take it to the car, I remembered the tracker still on Grace's vehicle and decided to leave it there for a while, despite the psychiatrist's professional advice. I knew I needed to re-establish some boundaries and replace the batteries in the tracker. I felt more confident in trusting Grace now, but we still needed counseling to resolve the trust issues, and keeping an eye on things wouldn't hurt until then. We began seeing a marriage counselor, and after 2 months of sessions, we felt more at ease with each other. My tracker hadn't detected any unusual or suspicious behavior from her, which helped me relax. Grace also started seeing her psychiatrist again on Wednesday evenings because she believed she needed some psychotherapy. She felt comfortable with this psychiatrist, who had agreed to provide her with additional therapy, even though it wasn't their main area of expertise. I adjusted the alert boundaries for her travel to the psychiatrist's office again. Grace mentioned that she had applied for a transfer to another school in the district for the upcoming year and was confident she would get it, even though it would mean a longer commute each day. I thought it would be worth it to keep her away from Clara. One evening, after Grace left for her appointment with her psychiatrist, I was sitting at my desk working on my laptop with the surveillance program running. I was always intrigued by the technology that allowed me to track her car. Grace had recently started scheduling her psychiatric appointments on Wednesday evenings so she wouldn't have to leave her job early. I noticed when she arrived at the office, and a short while later, her car left the parking lot, drove 2 blocks up the street, and parked again. I tried to think of what might be up the street, like a restaurant, to explain this movement, but the only thing I could remember was a motel located at or near that address. It was within the range I had set for my cell phone alerts, so if she had been going there before, I wouldn't have been notified. I looked it up in the phone book and confirmed that the address belonged to a Best Western motel. I was shocked. What on earth was she doing there? Realizing I needed more information, I got in my car and drove to the motel. Once I arrived, I confirmed that her car was indeed parked there. Tears welled up in my eyes as I sat and waited for her to return. An hour and a half later, I saw her and the psychiatrist come out of a ground-floor room near her car and leave. During the time I had waited, my anger intensified and my thoughts shifted toward revenge. If I confronted them now, I would have to abandon any hopes of a satisfying retaliation. As soon as they left, I entered the motel office and approached the night clerk, who seemed open to a little extra compensation when I confronted him. As I took a $50 bill from my wallet, I held it where he could easily see it. The party that just checked out of room 125. Can you tell me who registered there for tonight? He glanced at the $50 before responding. I'm really not allowed to disclose that. I understand, but could you make an exception? I asked, sliding the $50 across the counter. After pocketing the bill, he began typing on the computer and revealed the psychiatrist's name, along with the fact that she had paid in cash. He continued, explaining that she had booked a room every other week for the past 6 weeks. I then provided my wife's name and inquired if she had also stayed there. After a quick check on the computer, he informed me that she had paid for the alternating Wednesdays using our credit card. This could have been an oversight on her part, which I thought might work to my advantage. Since she usually managed our finances, perhaps she believed she could get away with it. Sliding him another $50, I requested a copy of the registrations for both parties over the past 6 weeks. It only took him a few minutes to print the information and hand it to me. I expect they'll return next week, I said. Will you be on duty then? Yes, I'm the regular swing shift clerk. I'd like to meet with you later this week to discuss something that could benefit us both. A plan was forming in my mind, and I needed a couple of days to finalize the details. I'll be here after 6, Monday through Friday, he replied. Great. I'll likely return on Friday, I told the clerk as I quickly left to get home before Grace arrived. I didn't want her to suspect that I was on to her. The following day, I contacted my divorce attorney, Donna Sinclair, to share my recent discovery and to ask her some questions about privacy laws. After that, I called a private investigator who specialized in electronic surveillance and scheduled a meeting with him for that afternoon. On Friday evening, I returned to the Best Western Motel to chat with the friendly clerk at the front desk. My excuse to Grace for going out was that I needed to buy some milk at the convenience store. Once I arrived at the motel, I requested a first-floor room away from the office for a week. I instructed the clerk to give my wife a key to the room I had rented when she came in on Wednesday to pay and register. After she left, he was to hand me the original registration and credit card receipts. He assured me there wouldn't be an issue since she was my wife using my room. I slipped him $100 and left. On Tuesday morning, during my lunch break, I met the surveillance expert at the motel. We went to the room I had rented, and I explained my plan to him. He mentioned that he had experience with this kind of surveillance and knew what was needed. He would install 2 mini digital cameras in the room, focusing primarily on the bed, one for close-ups and the other for a broader view of the room. He planned to hide the transmitter in the closet behind some extra blankets, with the system being controlled by a remote that he could operate from his vehicle outside, where the recorder would be located. I left him to set everything up and return to work. Meanwhile, at home, I tried to maintain a normal demeanor, but it was difficult to ignore her infidelity and how the psychiatrist had misled me. I was determined to make my revenge as impactful as possible for both of them. What puzzled me was how well Grace could conceal her betrayal. She acted as if her life revolved solely around home and work. In fact, she seemed to behave the same way when she was with Clara, and I never suspected anything until she was under pressure. After Grace left for her appointment with the psychiatrist on Wednesday evening, I monitored her on the tracking program as she repeated the events from the previous week. She picked up her lover and drove to the Best Western. Now, all I had to do was wait. I pretended to be asleep when she returned home so we wouldn't have to talk as she undressed and quietly slipped into bed. It seemed she didn't want to talk either. The following morning, I woke up early and left the house, stopping for breakfast at IHOP before heading to work. I had done this a few times before, so I didn't think it would raise any concerns for Grace. Shortly after 10 a.m., I received a call from my surveillance guy, who told me he had the footage I requested on a DVD and asked if I wanted to come by his office to view it first. I agreed and made up an excuse to my boss about needing to attend to personal matters, then drove to his office. The footage showed exactly what I had hoped for, and it was remarkably clear. Typically, watching 2 women making love would have excited me, but this time, knowing who they were infuriated me instead. When the surveillance expert presented me with his hefty bill, I eagerly wrote a check for the full amount. After that, I took the DVD to the divorce attorney's office, where we watched it together. She nodded in approval when it ended and remarked that it was a strong piece of evidence, perfectly sufficient for her plans. I also handed her the copies of the motel reservation details. I inquired about the time frame for serving Grace with the divorce papers, which included charges of adultery, and whether they could be delivered to her at her school. She mentioned it would take 2 days, and for an additional fee, they could be served directly in her classroom. I told her to proceed with that plan. Then I asked about the psychiatrist. The attorney informed me that it was possible to sue her for alienation of affection, but the main goal would be to seek the revocation of her medical license on ethical grounds. This would require filing a complaint with the state licensing board. We could also inform the psychiatrist's husband about her infidelity and see how he wanted to handle it. I asked if I could be the one to notify him. The attorney recommended that I provide a copy of the DVD and the registration details. If they had an open marriage, or if the husband didn't find his wife's involvement with another woman significant, that might conclude the matter. My attorney made copies of the DVD and registration data before I left her office, and I began searching for the psychiatrist's husband while waiting for the papers to be served. It didn't take long, but as I expected, they weren't listed in the phone book, so I had to look elsewhere. A doctor friend of mine helped me conduct some research through the local medical society, and I quickly obtained his name, address, and work and home phone numbers. He was an architect with an office downtown. Rather than spoil the surprise I was planning for his wife and mine, I decided to wait until after they were served before contacting him. The day had finally arrived, and my attorney called me at work the day before to inform me that it would take place the next morning. I quickly arranged for a friend with a truck to be at my house after Grace left for work so we could move my things. I had already rented a furnished apartment close to my job. This time, I was going to leave Grace the house. I didn't want to be surrounded by reminders of the 23 years of my life that I intended to consider a loss, apart from our son. I aimed to be out of the house with the few belongings I wanted before 10 o'clock because I figured Grace wouldn't stay at school long after being served and would return home quickly. We loaded the truck by 9:45 and left. I placed my wedding band on the kitchen table before I departed. Once we arrived at the furnished apartment I had rented, my friend helped carry in my limited belongings, wished me luck, and then left. While I was organizing things, my cell phone rang. When I checked the caller ID, I saw it was Grace, so I answered. "Jim, why did you do that? Why did you serve me in class? I'm now the laughingstock of the school and might lose my job," she cried. "If you wanted a divorce, Grace, why didn't you just tell me? You should have known I wouldn't let you humiliate me again. It would have been much easier if you'd said you wanted a divorce to pursue your other interests, and we could have parted on good terms. You left me no choice but to make this as difficult as possible for you and your lover." My lover. "What did you do?" she sobbed. After she finishes responding to my legal action against her for alienation of affection, she'll be fighting to keep her license in the state and will likely end up divorced. Oh my God, my God. Grace, I don't want you calling me again. If you have anything to say, do it through our lawyers. I'll be calling our son tonight to inform him about what's happening between us, and I won't sugarcoat anything. You've destroyed our marriage and our lives. I was looking forward to retiring with you someday, but that's all gone now. Maybe Oprah will pay you to share your story on her show. I had to add that jab. Before we hang up, I continued, can you explain why you got involved with another woman again? It wasn't supposed to happen. She called me one day after that meeting we had in her office and asked if I wanted to meet with her in the evenings for consultation. She thought I might have a fixation on lesbianism. When we got together, she suggested we act out some of the things I did with Clara, and before I knew it, I was hooked again. I'm so sorry. I could hear uncontrolled crying on the phone as I hung up. The divorce was finalized and received so much attention that Grace decided to move to Nashville, close to our son. He really didn't want her living nearby, but she is his mother, and he couldn't just cut ties with her like I did. He mentioned that she has become involved with another woman there, which seems to be what she wanted all along. The psychiatrist lost her license to practice in this state and ended up getting divorced. I won a $100,000 judgment in the alienation of affection lawsuit against her, and I used that money to buy a cabin by a lake a couple of hours away to enjoy my fishing hobby. I've met another woman who shares my disdain for Oprah, and we have a wonderful connection. We're getting married next week, and I'm looking forward to a happy retirement with her in the future. We plan to honeymoon at the cabin since she also enjoys fishing.